I think the alternative, though, is surrendering to the likes of Hezbollah.
Well, but it's not an all or nothing thing, is it, Peter? I mean, look at the death toll in the Lebanon in the last week. 800 people. We don't know how many of those are, quotes, terrorists, as you would brand them, and how many ordinary civilians who are just trying to get out of harm's way. But that's not going to win over hearts and minds, is it? The Israeli Defense Forces have confirmed that they have killed Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, as well as other senior Hezbollah operatives in overnight airstrikes in Beirut. The Israel Defense Air Force struck Hezbollah's central headquarters yesterday, which the IDF said was located underground under a residential building in a southern suburb of Beirut. Hezbollah have confirmed that their leader has been killed, and that came in the last hour. We can now speak to a spokesperson of the IDF, Petee Lerner. Peter, welcome to the programme.
Hi, Henry.
Hi. Now, Hezbollah, as you know, have confirmed what you announced earlier today on X. At what point did you decide to kill Hassan Nasrallah?
So Hassan Nasrallah, for 3 decades, has been at the heart, the center of strategy and death from Lebanon, but well beyond our region, and with terrorist activities throughout the globe, from South America, across Europe, and of course in the region in Syria and beyond. So Hassan Nasrallah, when he decided on the 8th of October to orchestrate an attack against Israel, and since then has fired over 9,000 rockets, missiles, drones towards Israel, he basically determined that he would become that specific target. Indeed, the operational conditions were in line yesterday when we conducted a precise strike on the Hezbollah headquarters, where he was hiding out, planning and colluding with his supporting terrorists, his deputy indeed. And indeed, when the conditions came to conduct the strike, the IDF and the Israeli Air Force conducted that strike based on the instructions and approval of the government. We, of course, have been very, very, I would say, meticulously gathering intelligence over the course of the years. So we knew where he was, we had real-time intelligence, and we had precision capabilities to strike his headquarters.
But how does this make Israel more safe? How does it make it more likely that these 60,000 people who were living in the north of Israel and who had to be evacuated can return to their homes? And of course, the thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of Lebanese who've had to leave the south of their country, how does this make the situation safer and more secure?
So Hassan Nasrallah was the arch terrorist, the person who was preventing a return of Israelis, the 60,000 Israelis, as you mentioned, that have been out of home for a year now, precisely because Hassan Nasrallah decided to launch attacks on them. So this person, this terrorist, this individual who has the trail of blood on his hands for decades, no longer poses a problem. So there can be a way forward. Of course, the organization that has accumulated some 200,000 rockets, missiles, and drones, more than most European countries. So that's a terrorist organization with a huge amount of power and firepower, poses a substantial threat. And so what we've done by eliminating him and the senior leadership of Hezbollah has created an opportunity to move forward, to move beyond this. Of course, there are still tens and dozens and hundreds and thousands of Hezbollah terrorists. But they have to make that decision if they want to continue.
Well, the thing is, Peter, you say Hezbollah terrorists. They don't see themselves that way. They see themselves as people in a country that they think has been terrorized by Israel over the years. They see themselves as part of an axis of resistance. And when the previous leader was killed by Israel in 1992, Hassan Nasrallah stepped up. He was more radical. The replacement for Hassan Nasrallah may be more radical still. How do you expect them, and indeed their sponsor Iran, to respond to this?
So I would say that there is a very clear decision that the region needs to make. Israel cannot tolerate what happened on October 7th ever again. Hezbollah is 10 times stronger than Hamas, than what they did in October 7th. And indeed, when Hezbollah joined in October 8th, out of a decision from Hassan Nasrallah to launch a war on Israel's north, we set a very, very clear path forward. In 2006, after the last war with Hezbollah, that came to an end with the United Nations Security Council resolution that explicitly determined that Hezbollah will not have rockets, missiles, drones in southern Lebanon, beneath or south to the Litani River. Unfortunately, we've revealed so much extensive footage that reveals how much firepower Hezbollah has accumulated in the south of Lebanon.
But Peter, you know as well as I do that Hezbollah may ignore UN Security Council resolutions, as Israel does when it chooses it. Those resolutions don't serve its purpose, 242, 338, etc. And indeed, the Prime Minister called the UN General Assembly an anti-Semitic swamp. And then it was only moments after that Israel conducted the strike against Hassan Nasrallah. How do you think, should I say, that the members of that assembly will be responding to this? Will they lean more into Israel and say, yeah, okay, we're on your side, we understand, or will they be repelled by this?
So I could say from from the military's perspective, we need to plan to deliver the objectives that the government gives us to restore safety and security to the people of northern Israel, so that 60,000 people can come home. The diplomats need to deal with the diplomacy, and I would hope that as the world did not tolerate the likes of Osama bin Laden or al-Baghdadi from ISIS, we should not tolerate the likes of Hassan Nasrallah, who is from the same cloth of those terrorists. There is no difference between those. On the contrary, he was stronger, more powerful, had much more firepower, and eventually also operating under the Iranian umbrella. So we need to identify the fact that there can be no peace with people like Hassan Nasrallah at the helm of decision-making that are trying to kill innocent civilians, so trying explicitly placing those civilians in harm's way. And from our perspective, today can be a better day. The IDF Chief of Staff named this operation in order to identify it as a better future, a path forward. So there is a way that we can move forward in a way that the region can benefit from more decent, from more moderate perspectives, and not this endless cycle of war. From our perspective,
well, yeah, you mentioned more moderate perspectives, Peter, and you mentioned Iran a moment ago, and the Supreme Leader has commented in the last hour, Ayatollah Khamenei, and he's declared that, quote, all the resistance forces in the region support and stand alongside Hezbollah. Hasn't this realized the worst fears of Israel's allies, including the USA, Britain and France, and pushed the region closer to an all-out war, putting Israeli forces in harm's way, perhaps leading to them having their boots on the ground?
Well, the reality that we might need to have boots on the ground is there, and we've been training and preparing, and the forces have been recruited. This week, we recruited more reservists over the last week, 2 brigades and more battalions today. So I would say, yes, it's an opportunity that there will be an escalation, and we need to be prepared for that. I think the alternative, though, is surrendering to the likes of Hezbollah.
It's not an all or nothing thing, is it, Peter? I mean, look at the death toll in the Lebanon in the last week. 800 people. We don't know how many of those are, quotes, terrorists, as you would brand them, and how many ordinary civilians who are just trying to get out of harm's way. But that's not going to win over hearts and minds, is it? In Lebanon, many of whom, the people there, don't like Hezbollah, perhaps maybe want rid of Hezbollah, but there's an awful lot of people who identify with, quotes, the resistance, and who will not be happy at the very large civilian death toll.
We won't be happy with the civilian death toll. We are operating in order to minimize that. But I would definitely say that the alternative that you perhaps are suggesting, Henry, is that we surrender and say, okay, so if they've forced evacuation of 60,000 because of the length and distance and the proximity of their rockets, missiles, and drones, and if they extended that, maybe they would be able to evacuate 100,000, 200,000, 1 million people of it from northern Israel. And the north now is being bombarded, and that is something, of course, that we have taken into consideration. But I think the alternative now, and where we are now in 2024, as we move forward, as we look forward, the alternative is, from an Israeli perspective, is unacceptable. The situation needs to change. Yep. The situation can only change if Hezbollah is pushed back, if they do not have these weapons of death and destruction, and if the region itself can look at that and actually the region and beyond, including our allies, and we're engaging with them, of course, from a military to military perspective, and also in the diplomatic arena, sends a very clear message that we want safety and security for everyone, not for Hezbollah to hide in residential buildings, not for Hezbollah to launch cruise missiles, surface-to-surface missiles from the attics of houses.
All right, Peter, we're going to have to leave it there. But thank you very much.
Alike.
Sure. Petee Lerner from the IDF, thank you very much indeed for talking to us this afternoon.